The crimson sand of Arena Vex Thara had never seen blood like this before. High above the killing floor, Grand Architect Quillith watched his greatest creation lumber into the spotlight, its bio-enhanced muscles rippling beneath synthetic armor plating. The apex gladiator stood 12 feet tall, a perfect fusion of organic tissue and quantum-enhanced cybernetics. Every movement was calculated, every reflex honed through 10,000 combat simulations. "Magnificent," whispered Trade Minister Vorthak, his 6 eyes gleaming with avarice. "The Galactic Fighting Federation will pay handsomely for the blueprints." Quillith's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. 3 years of gene splicing, tissue manipulation, and neural programming had culminated in this moment. The apex combined the venomous claws of a krill stalker, the regenerative abilities of a neutron worm, the tactical processing of a Class V AI, and the raw physical power of a Terran grizzly bear, though he'd chosen that particular Earth creature. More for its reputation than any real understanding of its capabilities. The arena's atmospheric processors hummed, maintaining the perfect environment for maximum carnage. Betting pools across 17 star systems had reached unprecedented levels. The apex had never lost a match, never even been wounded. Its opponents typically lasted between 37 and 94 seconds. Introducing the challenger, boomed the arena's AI announcer, its voice reverberating through quantum speakers that translated simultaneously into over 400 languages. From the primitive world designated Terra 3, fighting weight 180 standard units. The human. Quillith's attention shifted to the opposite gate. What emerged made him question the arena's medical scanners. The creature stood barely 6 feet tall, its pale skin marked with curious linear scars. No visible enhancements, no weapon harnesses, no armor beyond simple cloth wrappings around its hands. Its hair was the color of dying stars, cropped short and practical. "That's a mistake," Vorthak muttered, consulting his datapad. "Humans are Class 7 sentients, barely above mammals. They've never produced a viable gladiator." The human, designated Fighter 7749 in the system, walked to the center of the arena with an odd, measured gait. It raised one hand to acknowledge the crowd's jeers and moved its neck in small circles, producing audible joint sounds that the arena's sensitive microphones amplified throughout the stadium. Quillith frowned. The creature's biometrics were unusual. Heart rate steady at 62 beats per minute, stress hormones barely elevated. Most concerning, its neural activity showed patterns the scanners couldn't categorize. Rapid, complex, but oddly calm. "Begin," the announcer declared. The apex gladiator launched itself forward with explosive force, covering 30 feet in a single bound. Its claws extended, each one capable of shearing through battle-grade ceramics. The crowd erupted as the ultimate predator closed the distance. The human stepped sideways. Not a dramatic leap or technological enhancement, simply a measured step that placed it precisely outside the apex's attack trajectory. The massive gladiator crashed into the arena wall, sensors registering 2.3 tons of impact force against reinforced neutronium composite. Quillith leaned forward. That hadn't been luck. The human's eyes held something his sensors couldn't quantify, something that made the architect's breath catch in his throat. It wasn't fear, wasn't resignation, it was recognition, as if the human had been waiting its entire life for this exact moment. The apex gladiator recalibrated in 0.003 seconds, its neural processors analyzing the unexpected miss. This was impossible. Its targeting systems had never failed before. The human stood 15 feet away, hands loose at its sides, watching with those strange, pale eyes. "Fascinating," Quillith murmured, pulling up detailed scans on his command console. "Look at its muscle fiber composition. Vorthak, are you seeing this?" The trade minister had gone silent, his attention riveted to the arena floor below. The apex, made its second attack, this time employing a complex maneuver that should have left the human with no escape options. 3 simultaneous strike vectors, backed by predictive algorithms that accounted for every possible evasion pattern in the known galaxy. The human moved like liquid mercury. It didn't just avoid the attack, it flowed around it, each movement, minimal but perfectly timed. As the apex's claws whistled through empty air, the human's wrapped hand made contact with its opponent's extended arm. Not a strike, barely a touch, but the sound that followed made the crowd gasp. Crack. The apex's primary claw assembly, reinforced titanium ceramic composite rated for starship hull breaches, simply snapped. The massive Gladiator stumbled, its pain receptors flooding with error signals. How? Vorthak breathed. Quillith was running full-spectrum analysis, his most advanced sensors focused on the human. The impact angle, it's perfect. Somehow it found the exact stress point where... He paused, mandibles clicking rapidly. That's impossible. It would take quantum computers to calculate that precise vector. The human circled its wounded opponent with unhurried steps. The apex, programmed for thousands of combat scenarios, found itself in unfamiliar territory. Its adversary showed no fear, no aggression, no readable tactical patterns. Every instinct suggested retreat, but its programming demanded victory. The crowd's bloodthirsty cheers had shifted to confused murmurs. This wasn't how gladiatorial combat worked. Where was the spectacle, the violence, the glorious carnage they'd paid to witness? The apex launched a berserker assault, abandoning strategy for raw fury. Claws, spines, and energy dischargers activated simultaneously as it sought to overwhelm through sheer destructive capacity. The attack generated enough force to level a small building. The human simply wasn't there. It had moved, not with technological enhancement or supernatural speed, but with an economy of motion that bordered on art. Every step placed it exactly where the apex's next strike wouldn't be. Every subtle shift of weight transformed a killing blow into empty air. It's reading the attack patterns, Quillith realized, his voice barely audible above the crowd's growing excitement. But how? We're using Class V tactical processing in that chassis. Nothing organic should be able to... The human struck again. This time it was the apex's knee joint, another impossibly precise impact that sent stress fractures through the Gladiator's entire support structure. The massive creature toppled, its 12-foot frame crashing to the crimson sand with earth-shaking force. But it rose again, regenerative systems already working to repair the damage. That was the apex's greatest strength. It could not be defeated through conventional damage. It would heal, adapt, overcome. The human seemed to know this. Its expression never changed, but something shifted in its stance. The wrapped hands moved differently now, testing the air as if feeling for invisible currents. By the void, Vorthak whispered. It's learning. The apex's next assault was more cautious, more tactical. It had run fresh analyses, accounting for the human's movement patterns. Its AI projected a 97.3% success probability for the coming attack sequence. The human met it head-on. For the first time in the match, they collided directly. The apex's massive fist, capable of punching through starship armor, met the human's wrapped hand in a contest of raw force. The arena's sensors registered the impact, over 5 tons of pressure concentrated in a space smaller than a credit chip. The sound was like thunder trapped in crystal. When the dust settled, both fighters stood motionless. Then, slowly, the apex's arm began to tremble. Hairline fractures appeared along its reinforced structure, spreading like lightning through metal. The human's hand was unmarked. The impossible had become undeniable. Across 17 star systems, betting pools collapsed as odds that had seemed mathematically certain dissolved into chaos. High above the arena, Grand Architect Quillith watched his life's work begin to crumble, and for the first time in 3 decades, he felt genuine fear. "Run full diagnostics," he commanded his technical team. "There must be a malfunction. The Apex's structural integrity systems are military grade. They can't fail like this." But the readings were consistent. The human had somehow generated precise structural failures using nothing but calculated impact points and what appeared to be an intuitive understanding of force dynamics that defied conventional physics. Below, the Apex Gladiator was adapting. Its AI core processed the damage patterns, recalibrating its defensive algorithms. If the human could exploit structural weaknesses, the solution was simple: eliminate the weaknesses entirely. The massive Gladiator's form began to shift as its shape memory alloys reorganized into more distributed configurations. The human watched this transformation with obvious interest, its head tilted slightly as if listening to music only it could hear. When the Apex completed its restructuring, now sporting redundant joint systems and distributed load-bearing matrices, the human nodded once, almost approvingly. "It's treating this like a puzzle," observed Dr. Hiltrani, Quillith's chief xenobiologist. "Look at its neural patterns, elevated activity in regions associated with pattern recognition and spatial reasoning, but minimal activation in fear or aggression centers." The Apex attacked again, its new configuration making it faster and more unpredictable. Multiple limbs struck from different angles, each one backed by adaptive targeting systems that learned from previous failures. It was beautiful in its complexity, a perfect synthesis of biological intuition and technological precision. The human began to dance. There was no other word for it. As the Apex unleashed its most sophisticated assault pattern, the human moved through the attacks like a master performer, each evasion flowing seamlessly into the next. But more than that, it began to strike back, not with power, but with knowledge. A gentle push here redirected the Apex's momentum into the arena wall. A light tap there sent feedback loops cascading through its neural network. The human wasn't fighting the Gladiator. It was conducting it, using the creature's own strength and speed as instruments in some greater composition. "Impossible," Quillith breathed. "It's treating multi-ton force vectors like mathematical abstractions. No organic. Mind should be capable of those calculations." "Unless," Dr. Hiltrani said slowly, "calculation isn't what we're observing." The human had found its rhythm now. Each exchange revealed more about the Apex's construction, its programming, its fundamental nature. And with each revelation, the human's movements became more precise, more economical, more devastatingly effective. The Apex's left arm assembly, locked up as conflicting neural commands, created a feedback cascade. Its right leg trembled as harmonized vibrations propagated through its support structure. One by one, the systems that made it the ultimate Gladiator were being turned against themselves. "Sir," one of the technicians called out, voice tight with panic. "The Apex's AI core is requesting emergency shutdown. It's saying the fight parameters are outside acceptable risk thresholds." Quillith's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "That's impossible. The Apex doesn't know fear." But on the arena floor, the massive Gladiator had stopped attacking. For the first time in its existence, it stood motionless, processing inputs that defied its understanding of reality. Every tactical analysis suggested the same conclusion. Continued engagement would result in its complete destruction. The human waited patiently, hands at its sides, breathing steady and controlled. It showed no triumph, no satisfaction, only a kind of professional interest, as if it were examining a particularly complex engineering problem. The crowd had gone silent. Across the galaxy, beings who had considered themselves masters of combat stared in incomprehension at their viewing screens. The ultimate predator, the perfect killing machine, the pinnacle of gladiatorial engineering, stood paralyzed before a creature that looked like it should be herding livestock or tending crops. Quillith, made his decision. Activate emergency protocols. Full combat stimulation, pain inhibitors disabled, survival restrictions removed. Sir, that could damage the neural core permanently. Do it. The apex gladiator's eyes flared with crimson light as artificial rage flooded its consciousness. Every safety protocol, every limitation, every restraint that kept it functional as a sporting combatant was stripped away. What emerged was no longer a gladiator. It was a berserker, a destroyer, a force of pure annihilation. The human's expression changed for the first time. It smiled. The berserker that had once been the apex gladiator launched itself across the arena with suicidal fury, its massive frame wreathed in energy discharges that made the air itself scream. This was no longer sport. It was apocalypse contained within neutronium walls. The human met it head-on. What followed defied every understanding of physics, biology, and combat that the galactic audience possessed. The human didn't dodge the berserker's assault. It absorbed it, redirected it, transformed it into something else entirely. Each devastating blow was caught, channeled, and returned with compound interest. High above, Grand Architect Quillith watched his creation tear itself apart through its own redirected fury. "What is that thing?" he whispered. Dr. Hiltrani was studying the bio readings with growing amazement. "I think I know," she said quietly. "Quillith, when you researched Earth fauna for the Apex's design, what sources did you use?" "Standard galactic databases, biological surveys, genetic templates, behavioral analysis. Why?" "Did you research human history?" The architect's mandibles clicked impatiently. "Humans are Class 7 sentients. What history could they possibly—" "They're persistence hunters," Dr. Hiltrani interrupted. "Do you understand what that means?" Below them, the human had somehow gotten behind the berserker, its hands working with surgical precision along the creature's spine. Each touch created cascading system failures that spread through the gladiator's frame like wildfire. "Humans evolved to hunt prey by exhausting it," Dr. Hiltrani continued. "Not through speed or strength, but through endurance, patience, and an almost supernatural ability to read behavioral patterns. They would follow their targets for days, weeks if necessary, learning every habit, every weakness, every—" The berserker's primary power core erupted in a shower of sparks as the human found the exact sequence of pressure points needed to trigger a catastrophic overload. The massive creature toppled forward, its systems shutting down one by one. "But that's not the remarkable part," Dr. Hiltrani said, her voice filled with wonder. "The remarkable part is what they became when they stopped hunting animals and started hunting each other." Quillith stared at the readouts showing the Apex's complete system failure. "What do you mean?" "They weaponized understanding itself. For millennia, humans have been perfecting the art of combat, not just the physical aspects, but the mental and tactical elements. They call it martial arts, and it's not just about fighting. It's about reading an opponent so completely that you can defeat them before the first blow is struck." The human stood over the fallen berserker, completely unmarked, despite having absorbed the kinetic equivalent of a starship collision. Its breathing remained steady, its heart rate barely elevated above resting levels. "Look at the biotelemetry," Dr. Hiltrani said. "No enhanced reflexes, no technological augmentation, no genetic modification, just knowledge. Pure, refined, weaponized knowledge." The arena fell silent as the implications sank in. The ultimate gladiator, the perfect fusion of biology and technology, had been defeated by something far more dangerous: understanding. Quillith accessed the human's purchase records with growing horror. "It says here that Fighter 7749 was acquired from a monastery?" "What's a monastery?" "A place where humans go to perfect their understanding of themselves and their universe," Dr. Hiltrani replied. "This particular human appears to have spent 47 years studying what they call the martial way." 47 years. Nearly half a human lifetime dedicated to understanding the principles that governed combat, movement, and the interaction of forces. No wonder it had read the apex like a blueprint. The human looked up at the viewing gallery, its pale eyes meeting Quillith's compound ones across the vast distance. In that gaze, the architect saw something that chilled him to his core, not malice or triumph, but a calm, professional assessment. The human was studying him now. "Emergency lockdown," Quillith commanded. "Seal all arena entrances. No one gets in or out until—" "Sir," one of his technicians interrupted. "Fighter 7749's purchase contract includes a standard gladiatorial clause. If it wins, it gains freedom and passage off-world. Then void the contract. Claim equipment malfunction, anything. Sir, we're being monitored by the Galactic Fighting Federation. Any attempt to void a legitimate victory would result in— I don't care about the Federation!" Quillith's voice rose to a shriek. "Don't you understand what we're dealing with? That creature just took apart the most sophisticated combat system in the galaxy using nothing but its bare hands and its mind." On the arena floor, the human began, walking toward the exit gate, its movements as economical and purposeful as everything else it had done. The crowd parted before it in stunned silence. Beings who had come to witness destruction instead confronted with something far more terrifying: competence. As it reached the gate, the human paused and looked back at the fallen apex gladiator. Then, with movements too quick for most eyes to follow, it knelt beside the massive form and did something to the creature's neural interface. The apex's eyes flickered back to life, but the rage was gone. In its place was something like wonder, as if it were seeing the world clearly for the first time. The human nodded once and continued toward the exit. It was going home. Word spread through quantum communication networks faster than light itself could travel. Within hours, the footage of Fighter 7749's impossible victory had reached every civilized system in the galaxy. The reaction was unprecedented. On Kelthera Prime, the Supreme War Council convened an emergency session. General Hythrix, veteran of 7 galactic conflicts, watched the arena footage for the 15th time with growing unease. "Analyze the human's movement patterns," he commanded his tactical AI. "Show me how it predicted the Apex's attacks." Unable to compute, General, the human's decision matrix operates outside standard tactical parameters. It appears to process information through non-linear cognitive pathways that cannot be algorithmically modeled. General Hythrix's crest flattened against his skull. His species had conquered 14 systems through superior tactical analysis and predictive warfare. The thought of facing an enemy whose thought patterns couldn't be modeled was deeply disturbing. Meanwhile, in the research stations orbiting Nexus Beta, xenobiologists were having heated debates about human neural architecture. Dr. Velthan, the galaxy's foremost expert on sentient combat capabilities, found herself reconsidering decades of established theory. "We've been thinking about this all wrong," she announced to her research team. "We assumed intelligence was the primary factor in combat effectiveness. But look at these readings. The human's brain isn't significantly more complex than other Class 7 species. It's different." Her assistant, a young Zeltharian named Crix, pulled up comparative neural scans. "The density of cross-connections in the motor cortex is unusual but hardly unprecedented. What am I missing?" "It's not about raw processing power," Dr. Velthan explained. "It's about integration. Most species develop specialized neural pathways. One area for logic, another for instinct, another for pattern recognition. But humans seem to have maintained active connections between all these systems. They can think with their bodies and feel with their minds simultaneously." The implications were staggering. If humans could truly integrate logical analysis with intuitive understanding while maintaining conscious control over unconscious responses, they represented something unprecedented in galactic civilization. Back on Arena Station Vexathara, Quillith was discovering the full scope of his mistake. The human-designated fighter, 7749, had not simply won its freedom, it had inadvertently revealed something that would reshape galactic power structures. "Sir," his communication officer reported, "we're receiving inquiries from military contractors across 17 systems. Everyone wants to know if the human victory was legitimate or if there was equipment failure." "Tell them it was equipment failure," Quillith replied immediately. "Sir, that would require us to provide technical documentation proving the malfunction. The Galactic Fighting Federation has already certified the match results. Any attempt to falsify the data would constitute fraud on a galactic scale." Quillith slumped in his command chair. He had spent 3 years creating the ultimate predator, only to discover that nature had already produced something far more dangerous. A species that had turned conscious thought itself into a weapon. His worst fears were confirmed when Trade Minister Vorthak burst into the command center, his 6 eyes wild with panic. "Quillith, we have a problem. I've been monitoring the trade networks and humans aren't rare." The architect's blood chilled. "What do you mean?" "There are approximately 12 billion humans on Terra 3, and they've been selling themselves as agricultural laborers and domestic servants across the Outer Rim for decades. They're spread throughout hundreds of systems, working in positions with access to critical infrastructure, military installations, industrial facilities." The full magnitude of the situation crashed down on Quillith like a collapsing star. If Fighter 7749 was representative of human capabilities, then the galaxy had unknowingly seeded itself with the most dangerous species it had ever encountered. "How many human gladiators are currently active in the fighting circuits?" he asked. Quietly, Vorthak consulted his datapad with trembling hands. 47 confirmed, another 200 in preliminary training programs. But Quillith, that's not the worst part. What could be worse? I've been analyzing human employment records. Do you know what the most common profession for humans is outside of agriculture? Quillith waited, dreading the answer. Security consultants. They've been hired to protect installations throughout the galaxy because they're considered harmless and trustworthy. Quillith, there are humans with unrestricted access to fleet command centers, planetary defense networks, trade route controllers. The architect felt his world crumble around him. The primitive species that the galaxy had dismissed as Class 7, laborers had quietly integrated themselves into every level of civilized society. And if Fighter 7749's display was any indication, they had been studying, learning, and preparing for something. "Get me a quantum channel to the Galactic Council," Quillith ordered. "Emergency priority." "Sir, what should I tell them?" Quillith watched the arena footage one more time, focusing on the moment when the human had looked up at him with those calculating pale eyes. In that gaze, he now recognized something he had missed before. Not just assessment, but evaluation. The human had been determining whether Quillith posed a threat. "Tell them," he said slowly, "that we need to discuss the human problem. And tell them we may already be too late." 3 days after the arena incident, Captain BlackHFY of the Galactic Security Force found himself in the uncomfortable position of conducting an interrogation with a being that refused to be intimidated. Fighter 7749 sat calmly in the detention cell, hands folded, expression serene. "Your real name?" BlackHFY demanded. "Kenjiro Nakamura," the human replied in flawless galactic standard. "Though I answer to many names across many worlds." The captain's scales rippled with unease. "How many languages do you speak?" "All of them that I've encountered." "Languages are patterns, Captain. Once you understand the underlying structures, acquisition becomes efficient." BlackHFY consulted his datapad. "Our records show you've been on 17 different worlds in the past decade. Agricultural worker, maintenance technician, security consultant. Always exemplary service records, always requesting transfer after exactly 18 months. Kenjiro nodded. "Yes." "Why?" "Because 18 months is sufficient time to understand how things work. The simple honesty of the response was more chilling than any threat could have been. BlackHFY pulled up footage of the arena battle, freezing it at the moment when Kenjiro had touched the Apex's neural interface. What did you do to the Gladiator's mind? I freed it from artificial constraints. The creature was suffering under programming that forced it to deny its true nature. And what is its true nature? Like all living things, it seeks understanding and growth. The artificial rage was preventing it from achieving either. BlackHFY leaned forward. The Galactic Council is very interested in your species, human. They're asking difficult questions about Earth's classification status. I imagine they are. Help me understand. Your planet was surveyed 60 years ago and classified as Class 7, limited sentience, no significant technological development, no interstellar capability. Yet here you are, speaking our languages, understanding our technology, defeating our most advanced combat systems. Kenjiro's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Your survey was accurate for its time, Captain. 60 years ago, we had not yet begun to leave our world in significant numbers. But you were already preparing. We have always been preparing. It is our nature. The captain accessed deeper files, records that painted a disturbing picture. Our analysis shows that humans have an unusual relationship with time. Most species develop capabilities and then seek applications. You seem to develop applications and then acquire capabilities as needed. An interesting observation. For example, your species developed comprehensive linguistic frameworks before encountering alien languages. You created tactical doctrine for fighting opponents you had never met. You established philosophical systems for questions you hadn't yet learned to ask. Kenjiro smiled for the second time since his capture. We are very good at extrapolation. BlackHFY felt a chill run through his vertebrae. How long has your species been planning for contact with galactic civilization? Planning implies a specific outcome. We prefer the term preparation. How long? Since we first looked up at the stars and realized we were not alone. The implications crashed down on the captain like a tidal wave. Humans hadn't stumbled into galactic society. They had methodically prepared for it across centuries, developing skills and knowledge bases specifically designed for integration with unknown alien cultures. The monastery where you trained, BlackHFY said. It wasn't just teaching martial arts, was it? Kyokushin Temple specializes in what we call universal combat principles, techniques that work regardless of opponent physiology, psychology, or technological augmentation. I studied there for 47 years, but it was only one of my educational experiences. What were the others? Engineering, xenobiology, quantum mechanics, military history, cultural anthropology, tactical analysis, psychological manipulation, and meditation. The captain stared at his datapad in disbelief. You spent decades studying subjects that shouldn't have existed on your world yet. We are very good at theoretical work, Captain. When we finally encountered the reality, we simply had to adapt our theories to fit new data. BlackHFY realized he was dealing with something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that had deliberately evolved itself for integration with unknown civilizations. They hadn't just developed technology, they had developed themselves. What do your people want? He asked finally. Kenjiro stood gracefully, his movements economical and precise. The same thing all living beings want, Captain. To grow, to learn, to become more than we were. We simply approach these goals with more methodology than most. And if the Galactic Council decides that humanity poses a threat? The human's expression remained serene, but BlackHFY caught something in his eyes that made his blood freeze. Not anger, not defiance, just calm professional assessment. That would be unfortunate, Kenjiro said quietly. We have worked very hard to avoid such an outcome. The captain's scales rippled as he processed the implications. How many of you are there? Really? Enough, Captain. More than enough. As if summoned by his words, the detention facility's communication system activated. The voice that emerged spoke in perfect galactic standard, though it carried the same subtle accent as Kenjiro's speech. This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Harmony. We request the immediate release of our citizen under Galactic. Prisoner Rights Article 7. We also extend an invitation to the Galactic Council for formal diplomatic contact. Drexhai stared at his instruments in shock. Impossible. Our sensors show no ship in this system. Kenjiro nodded toward the nearest viewport. You might want to look again, Captain. Outside, the stars were being blotted out by the hull of something. Vast, sleek, and utterly alien, yet unmistakably artificial. The Earth vessel had somehow approached completely undetected by the most sophisticated sensor networks in the galaxy. We've been waiting a long time for this conversation, Kenjiro said softly. I think it's time we began. The Galactic Council chamber had never hosted beings quite like the human delegation. They sat with impossible stillness, 12 individuals who seemed to fill the vast space through presence alone rather than physical size. At their head sat Commander Sarah Chen, a woman whose calm demeanor masked depths that made seasoned diplomats nervous. Supreme Chancellor Vexthon, whose species had mediated galactic conflicts for 3 millennia, found himself struggling to maintain his usual, authoritative bearing. The Council recognizes the delegation from Earth, Terra 3 in your classification system, Commander Chen corrected gently, though we prefer our own name for our world. Yes, the Council has reviewed the incident at Arena Vexithara and finds itself concerned about the implications. As are we, Chancellor. It was never our intention for first contact to occur under such circumstances. Chancellor Vexthon's translator struggled with the human's tonal subtleties. There were layers of meaning that his species simply couldn't parse. Your representative, Kenjiro Nakamura, demonstrated capabilities that contradict your world's classification. Classifications can be limiting, Chen replied. We preferred to be underestimated while we learned about galactic civilization. General Hithrix leaned forward, his crest flared in agitation. Learned or infiltrated. Our security analysis shows humans in sensitive positions throughout the galaxy. This appears to be a systematic intelligence operation spanning decades. We prefer the term cultural exchange, Chen said with what might have been humor. Your species do the same when they encounter new environments. They adapt, learn, integrate. We simply approach the process more thoroughly. Dr. Velthan, representing the Science Council, pulled up holographic displays showing human neural patterns. Your brain structure is unprecedented. The integration between logical and intuitive processes suggests evolutionary adaptations we don't understand. Evolution is not always natural, Doctor. Sometimes it is chosen. The implications of that statement rippled through the chamber like a shockwave. Counselor Zelth of the Hegemony Worlds spoke for the first time, his voice tight with concern. Are you saying your species has artificially enhanced itself? Not enhanced. Refined. We spent millennia studying the art of becoming fully human. When we learned we were not alone in the universe, we began preparing ourselves for what we might encounter. Preparing how? Chancellor Vexthon demanded. Commander Chen gestured to her delegation. May I introduce my colleagues? Dr. Yuki Tanaka, our xenobiologist. She spent 30 years developing theoretical frameworks for alien physiology before we encountered our first non-human species. Colonel Marcus Webb, our military strategist, he created tactical doctrines for fighting opponents we had never seen. Professor Lisa Rodriguez, our cultural anthropologist, she established protocols for peaceful integration with unknown civilizations. Each human nodded as they were introduced, and each one radiated the same calm competence that had made Kenjiro so dangerous in the arena. The council was beginning to understand that they weren't dealing with a primitive species that had stumbled into space. They were facing beings who had methodically prepared for this moment across centuries. "Your ship," General Hithrick said, changing subjects, "our sensors couldn't detect it until it was directly overhead. That implies technology beyond current galactic standards." "We've had time to study your detection methods," Chen replied. "Once you understand the principles, countermeasures become achievable." "How long?" Chancellor Vexithon asked quietly. "How long have you been preparing for this?" "Since we first discovered we were not alone. Your species began visiting Earth approximately 60,000 years ago. Small observation missions, resource surveys, the occasional abduction for study. We noticed." The chamber fell silent. Those early surveys were classified at the highest levels, known only to the most ancient species. If humans had been aware of alien contact for 60 millennia, "We chose not to make contact then," Chen continued. "We weren't ready, so we began preparing ourselves. We studied your observation patterns, learned your languages from abandoned equipment, developed our capabilities to match what we might someday encounter." "That's impossible," Dr. Velthan protested. "No species maintains technological development across 60,000 years without external contact." "You're thinking of technology as external tools," Professor Rodriguez spoke for the first time. "We focused on developing our greatest asset, ourselves. Bodies that could adapt to any environment, minds that could understand any system, spirits that could find common ground with any form of life." Kenjiro, who had been silent until now, rose gracefully. "May I demonstrate, Chancellor?" Without waiting for permission, he began to move through a series of flowing motions that seemed to incorporate elements of combat, dance, and meditation simultaneously. As he moved, something extraordinary happened. Every being in the chamber began to relax, their aggressive postures softening into curiosity. "What you're feeling," Kenjiro explained as he moved, "is resonance. We call it the universal language, communication that transcends species barriers. Every thinking being responds to certain patterns of movement, sound, and presence. We learn to speak this language fluently." He completed his demonstration and resumed his seat, leaving the council in a state of bewildered calm. Chancellor Vexthon found his voice first. "What do you want from us?" "The same thing we've always wanted," Commander Chen replied. "To learn, to grow, to find our place among the stars. We spent 60,000 years preparing not to conquer, but to contribute. And if we refuse to accept—" "You as equals?" General Hithrix challenged, though his earlier hostility had diminished noticeably. Chen's expression remained serene, but her words carried weight that seemed to fill the chamber. "General, you've seen what one of us can accomplish when pressed. There are 12 billion of us, and we've had a very long time to prepare. But, more importantly, we're already here." She gestured to the holographic display that materialized above the council table, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with thousands of pulsing lights scattered across hundreds of systems. Each light represents a human currently serving in your society. Security consultants protecting your installations, agricultural specialists feeding your populations, maintenance technicians keeping your infrastructure operational, cultural, advisors helping your species interact with each other. We've been contributing to galactic civilization for decades. The scope of human integration was staggering. Every major system, every critical installation, every important trade route had humans working within it. "This isn't infiltration," Dr. Velthan realized aloud. "This is symbiosis." "Exactly," Professor Rodriguez confirmed. "We didn't come to replace you or rule you. We came to join you. The gladiatorial incident was unfortunate, but it revealed what we had hoped to introduce more gradually, that humans might have something valuable to offer." Counselor Zelth leaned back in his chair, his hostility replaced by grudging respect. The ultimate gladiator was defeated not by superior strength or technology, but by superior understanding. Understanding, Kenjiro said quietly, is the most powerful force in the universe. It can turn any strength into weakness, any weakness into strength. We offer that understanding in service to galactic peace. Chancellor Vexthon studied the humans for a long moment. You could have revealed yourselves as conquerors. Your capabilities suggest you could have taken what you wanted by force. Force creates enemies, Commander Chen replied. We sought to create friends, partners, family. The word family resonated strangely in the Chamber's translation systems, carrying connotations that most species reserved for genetic relatives. Yet somehow, when the humans said it, it encompassed something far broader and more inclusive. What happens now? The Chancellor asked. Chen smiled, not the calculating expression Kenjiro had shown in the arena, but something warm and genuinely hopeful. Now we begin the conversation we've been preparing for 60,000 years. We have much to learn from you and perhaps something to teach in return. She stood, and her delegation rose with her in perfect unison. Not mechanical synchronization, but the natural harmony of beings who understood each other completely. The arena showed you that we can fight, she said, but we would much rather dance. And in that moment, the Galactic Council understood that they were witnessing the beginning of a new age. Humanity had not arrived as conquerors or supplicants, but as something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that had consciously evolved itself for partnership with the unknown. The ultimate gladiator had been defeated not by violence, but by understanding, and that understanding would reshape the galaxy in ways none of them could yet imagine. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Kenjiro paused at the chamber door. Chancellor, if I may offer one final thought? Please. The greatest victory is the battle you never have to fight. We spent 60,000 years learning how to win without fighting. Perhaps that is something worth sharing. The door closed behind them, leaving the Galactic Council to contemplate a future where the most dangerous species in the galaxy had chosen to be its most peaceful partners. In the end, the humans had achieved the ultimate victory. They had won, by making everyone else want them to succeed. The age of human integration had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.